Today's topic is aging. No matter how young you are, we're all aging, right? But when we're talking about aging, we're talking about people who are over 65, right? Anyway, here is aging of Korea. Can anyone tell me if there's any typo here? It says aging of Korea, a democratic time bomb. It should be demographic, right? I don't know how many of you caught that. Anyway, here's a lecture outline. Introduction. I always have a very brief introduction, followed by sort of discussion on how this whole idea of elderly began. And we'll discuss briefly global trends in population aging. After that, we talk about Korea, how Korea is currently the most rapidly aging society in the world. And this is, based on data, right? So we'll look at those data. And then talk about the economic impact of the aging of the population. And lastly, problems facing the elderly in Korea. You see, when the population ages, we talk about impacts at two levels. One, societal, which is largely economic, and impact at the personal level. As there are more elderlies, we need to talk about what kinds of problems they face at the individual level, right? So we'll talk about those. All right. In the interest of time, I'll not show any videos today. Just get right to the discussion. Now, what are the what are the most dreaded 4 Ds in human life? Death. What are the other 3? Disease or illness. 2 more. Say. Divorce, yes. If one were to get married, divorce. And last one is close enough. It's disaster, divorce, disease, death, and if there were number 5th dreaded D, it'll be debt. I'm sure you're too young to be in any debt, but it's not a good thing, I would say. Snoopy, we only live once. Wrong. We only die once. We live every day. It's quite profound. From a dog. Amazing stuff. How you feel about your own age, and this is so true. You wish you were older up to late teens, right? But then from late teens to late 20s, or not even late 20s, mid 20s or upper 20s, you feel content with your age. After that, you wish you were younger. Okay? I think that's quite an agreeable portrayal of who we are or what we are as far as age is concerned. Most countries have rising life expectancies and an aging population, trends that emerged first in developed countries but are now seen in virtually all developing countries. The aged population is currently at its highest level in human history. The UN predicts the rate of population aging in the 21st century will exceed that of the previous century. Okay, so it's safe to say that aging is happening at an unprecedented level all over the world today. The question is, what is the nature of population aging in the world and in Korea? What are the factors which account for population aging in Korea? What are the impact of population aging at the societal level? And what are the impacts of aging at the individual level? So at the sort of repeating myself here, but anyway, I think it's always good to sort of phrase things in question form. The elderly, the beginning. I think this has a fascinating history. Okay? Does anyone know when the world began to sort of pick the age 65 as the time we designate people as being old? Roughly, was it 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 10 years ago? Well, to that question, the answer is right here. Well, again, it's an international standard now, right? From age 65, people are designated as being old, and how did it happen? It happened in 1889. Because Prussia, now Germany, introduced the world's first old age sort of a pension. Okay? So, at the time, Chancellor Bismarck, he's the man who, or he was the man who decided on the age 65. Again, his counselors had this meeting, again, in introducing the world's first sort of an old age pension. They had to decide from what age they give this benefit to, right? So his, let's say secretaries asked him, "Sir," or, Chancellor Bismarck, "from what age should we offer this benefit to?" And he was like, let me think. He arrived at 65. And you know why it made sense? At the time, the life expectancy at birth was only 30 years, believe it or not. 30. What's the life expectancy at birth now? Global average. It's 73. But just, 30 years ago, it was only 30 years. So this means that only a few people made it to the age 65. So there were not that many people receiving old age pension. But, many old age pensions are in trouble right now all over the world because too many people are living past the age 65. Okay? Anyway, 30 years. It's simply amazing, right? In fact, for about 99.9% of human history, the average life expectancy hovered around 20 years. You're lucky to be living today, right now. The world average of life expectancy at birth began to increase only after the Industrial Revolution. Okay? So in 1900, 31 years was the average life expectancy at birth. 1950, 46, 2000, 66, 2023, 73 years. And again, this is a global average. And look at this. This is 0 year. 23 was the average, 29, 1800, 31, 1900. And so you get the idea, right? And now, this looks not bad, but if you look at this, it looks really bad, right? It's the same year, from 0 year to 2023. It definitely looks more dramatic, doesn't it? Right? Eventually, the age of 65 years became the universal standard for designating someone as being an elderly person. Okay? All right, let's look at now global trends in population aging. And we called what's happening today an elder explosion or gray tsunami. Okay? And it's sweeping the world today. Global trends in population show that population aging is unprecedented, without parallel in human history. 21st century will witness even more rapid aging than ever before. According to the UN, in 1950, those aged 65 or older accounted for only 5% of the total population, globally speaking. But by 2010, that jumped to 7.7% of the world population, and by 2050, it'll be 16%. You know what that means? From 1950 to 2050, in 100 years, the proportion of the elderly in the total global population will jump 3 times. Okay? So I think that's really telling, right? Rather than giving the absolute numbers, right? So here we go. 1950, only 5% comprised of the elderly of the global population, jumping to 7% in 2000, but going all the way to 16% in 2050. In 2019, for the first time in human history, people aged 65 and older outnumbered children under age 5. Again, for the first time ever in human history. Whether you place it at 60,000, 300,000, millions, doesn't matter. There you go. 2019 is, again, when the number of the elderlies surpassed the number of children under age 5. Okay? And I think we need to be thankful that fertility rate globally is falling. As you can see here, in 1950 it was 4.7, fell down to 2.9 in 2017, but it is expected to fall to 2050, and by 2100 fall to 1.7. But maybe that's when damage is already done. Okay? And we'll talk about this under population and urbanization, where the world population is just killing the planet, if anything, right? So anyway, we'll talk about that later. Where do the majority of the elderly population live? In developed countries or developing countries? See, you see why I had this question for you? If the answer is obvious, I would not ask a question, right? It's developing countries. Why? As you may know, 2/3 of the world population live in developing countries. So in absolute number, there's just, more elderlies living in developing countries. Like you can see here. So this is the orange shaded block is the proportion of the elderly in developed countries. The rest, the proportion of the elderly living in developing countries, as you can see, maybe back in 1950 it was close, but a far larger number of elderlies do live in developing countries. Feminization of aging. As you know, women outlive men by 5 to 6 years in almost every country. So when we say feminization of aging, we're talking about more elderlies comprising of women than males. So here we go. Just look at the example of Korea. In 2021, for example, 45% of those 65 or older comprised men. The rest, women. Now, for those in their 85 or older, proportion of females is significantly larger, right? So 63% of those who are 65 or older comprised women, okay? And 36% comprised men. Now we turn to the graying of Korea, and this is just amazing stuff, all right? And if this is on the final exam, you have to let me know that you know this stuff. And this is what I mean, okay? You gotta know the wording and also the exact number, okay? This is what I mean. In regard to aging, countries are categorized into three types to indicate the level of aging. Okay? So here we go. Society is considered an aging society when more than 7% of the total population comprises of the elderly. Okay? 7%. Next level of aging is indicated by the phrase aged society, when 14% of the total population comprises of the elderly. Next is, it's a society that flies. I'm just kidding. Super-aged society. Now, what do you think is the percentage? 7, 14, and next is? No. They do this weird mathematics. It's 20%. I don't know why they did this. I think they're being tricky. Okay, so if you, on the final exam, you go aging society is 7%, aged society 14, and if you put super-aged society in 21, I'm going to dock off half of everything you get. I'm just kidding, but make sure you know. 7%, 14%, 21. No, sorry. 20, all right? Korea is currently the most rapidly aging society in the world because Korea became an aging society, 7%, in 2000. It became an aged society in 2017. So how long did Korea take to make a transition from aging to aged? How long did Korea take? 17 years. Keep that in mind. 17 years. And Korea will become a super-aged next year in 2025. So 17 years, and from aged to super-aged, just 8 years. Guess which country holds the Guinness World Record as having taken the shortest time to make a transition from aging to aged, from aged to super-aged? Which country? No, I'm talking about before Korea. Japan. And nobody ever expected this record to be broken. And you know why Korea is celebrating? Because we're breaking Japan's record. I'm just kidding. I think we love breaking records held by Japan, but this one is not a good one. It's a terrible one, right? So here we go. For comparisons, look how long other countries took to make a transition from aging to aged, from aged to super aged. So let me ask you again. See if you remember this. How long did Korea take? Aging to aged? 17, right? Aged, super aged? 8 years. Keep that in mind. Keep those in mind. How long did France take? 115 years and then 39 years. How long did Korea take? 17 years and 8 years, right? And what about Sweden? It took 85 years and 40 years. How long did Korea take again? USA, a lot of you guys come from USA. It took USA 73 years and then 21 years. All right? And then comes Germany, 40 years, 40 years. Italy, 61, 19. And here is Japan. 24, 4, 12. See, before you hear about Korea, just looking at Japan's record, you go, wow, that is so, 24, 12. Who would have guessed? Again, nobody with a right mind thought that record could be broken. Okay? So again, 24-12 for a total of 36. And here is Korea. 17, breaking Japan's record by 7 years. 8 years, breaking Japan's record by 4 years. And do you think this record will ever be broken? Yes. Can you think of a country that... No, it's impossible. I cannot imagine any country with a fertility rate of like 0.7. Okay? It's really like intentionally killing your country. It's a quiet revolution. It's a revolution from below. Peaceful revolution. It's like saying, I cannot take this. This society is so painful, I refuse to get married and I refuse to have babies. That's what a lot of people are saying. Okay? So again, mark my words, this will never be broken. Okay? Okay, the rapid aging population in Korea is also indicated by the shrinking in the number and proportion of young adults in Korea, as can be seen in the next slide. So this is the proportion of young adults, those between the age of 19 and 34 years. Back in 1990, almost 32% comprised of these young adults. Look where it is now. It's down to about 20%. And by 2050, it'll be down to 11%. 2050 is just 25 years from now. 26, right? And this is the proportion of population by age groups. So this is teens, less than 10 years old, teenagers, those in their 20s, those in their 70s, and so on, right? And so back in 2014, those with the highest proportion of the elderly, the age group with the highest proportion was those in their 40s, okay? Followed by 50s, and so on, right? But look where it stands now, right? This is 2023, and those in their 50s has the largest proportion, okay? Followed by those in their 40s, 60s, 30s, 70s, 20s, and you see how the less than 10 years old, smallest proportion of the total population. Okay? The proportion of the elderly in Korea will continue to rise propitiously in the near future. So what's the proportion of the elderly again as of next year? 2020, 2025. 20%, right? Super aged. 2030, it'll be 24.5%. 2040, 32.8%. And 2050, 39.8%. And 2050, oops. So already by 2050, currently the country with the highest proportion of elderly in the total population is Japan. But by 2050, it'll be Korea. That's number one in the world. Number one. Okay? And does Korea like to be number one? Yes, but not this one, right? So, and 2050, if you thought 2050 was bad, 2067, 46.5% of the total population will comprise of elderlies, which means you come back to Korea in 2067, you get in the subway, half of the commuters will be elderlies, and half of the seats will be reserved for elderlies. Okay? Imagine that. And that's really going to happen, right? This is the population distribution according to age in Korea. This is what is called population pyramid, okay? Where the proportion of elderlies in the total population is small, and the proportion of young children and also young adults relatively large, right? But by 2010, it becomes like a rugby ball or American football ball. And by 2050, it becomes a pylon, inverse pylon, or inverse pyramid. Okay? So this is the dotted line is the world. So by 2067, globally, only 18.6% will comprise of elderlies. Whereas for Korea, it'll be, again, 46.5%, which means, again, about half of the total population in Korea will comprise of elderlies. So, your million-dollar question for today. What are the reasons for the aging of the population? What are the factors that make a population age? To give you a hint, there are two factors. Okay, low fertility rate is one. Low fertility rate is related to the bigger factor. Yes. Longer life expectancy. Okay? So the two factors are these. The increasing average life expectancy at birth and low fertility rate. Okay? So we're going to talk about these two at greater length, all right? So first, increasing average life expectancy at birth. We're talking about Korea, okay? Back in 1950, it was 52 years. 1970, it rose to 61.93. And the latest is 82.7. We have data that are updated on a yearly basis, but somehow life expectancy at birth is always like 2 years late. Or it takes, I guess, longer to tabulate this. But anyway, this is the latest, okay? And the yellow line is for men. The red line is overall average. The blue line, navy blue line, is for women. For some reason, in 2022, almost for the first time in a very long time, it fell. You see? Again, up to 2021, it kept on rising, right? Even just by little. But for the first time in, I would say, 50 years, we had a slight decline. Did something happen? Too much soju? Too much ramen? I don't know. But I hope it's not a trend, but this is what happened. And just for fun, well, let's see which countries have the highest life expectancy at birth. And this is from 2023. I don't know how they got this 2023, but this is not from a Korean source. But anyway, Japan has the world's highest life expectancy at birth, followed by Switzerland, Singapore, Italy, South Korea, and so on. And we can also talk about the countries with the shortest life expectancies. Okay? So this is quite amazing, right? You have countries with over 80-year life expectancy at birth, and then there are these countries, I'm sorry to say, most of them are, I think, in Africa. Their life expectancy is in their 50s, right? I think this one is the only one with 60, just barely 60, right? Continuing with the the reasons for the declining population in Korea, this is a bigger factor, of course, right? Low fertility rate. It's the average number of babies born to women aged between 15 and 49. Now, this is sometimes you don't get to read this part between aged between 15 and 49 because it's the same as the average number of babies born to women in their lifetime. Why? Even if it says lifetime, you can only have babies roughly up to the age of 49. All right? Again, don't be fooled by some definition that says, number of babies born to women in their lifetime, or number of babies born to women aged between 15 and 49. They're essentially the same thing. Okay? Anyway, Korea's fertility rate, which had been the world's lowest for some time, dropped yet again to, oh my God, this has not been updated. Well, it's 7.72 last year. Okay? I'm surprised that I didn't change this. Obviously, this is the lowest ever since Korea has been compiling these data since the mid-1950s. Okay? And I'll tell you why this is such a terrible number. Okay? And so here we go. So, believe it or not, back in 1960, Korea's fertility rate was over 6. Okay? But as it has been falling, and finally I have an updated number here. Last year, 0.72. Okay? And I think this is more telling. Okay? If you just think of the fertility rate, it may not give you a concrete sense of number, right? But take a look at this. Here, 1970, this is fertility rate of 4.53. all right? But this is the number of birth. So back in 1970, the number of birth was over 1 million. Okay? Over 1 million. And population was even less than what is today, right? Population today, 50 million. Population back then was probably 35 million or so. And yet we had 1 million births. But look how many births we had last year. 230,000. So in just about 50 years, Korea's number of births dropped by a whopping 75%. Okay? So again, just looking at the fertility rate may not give you a full sense of how terrible this is, right? Just look at the numbers, number of births, from 1 million to 230,000 in just a half century. Okay? Korea's fertility rate is forecast to fall to as low as 0.61 in the next few years. The two most representative indicators symbolizing the current situation in Korea are said to be the lowest fertility rate in the world. Let me skip that. Just for fun, do you think the fertility rate in Seoul is higher or lower than other major cities and provinces? Lower. Why? You know, Seoul is full of excitement. It's, you know, all the clubs, restaurants. Yes, right. More expensive, more competitive, and people are rude, no? They don't hold doors for you, do they? It's the same thing in the countryside, I'm sorry to say. Anyway, so you can see how this is the national average, 7.72. This is Seoul. Okay? At 0.55, it's considerably lower than the national average. Now, see, I've been dying to tell you this. You have it now, right? So the reason why the fertility rate of 0.72 is terrible is this. There is a thing called replacement level fertility rate. Okay? Replacement level fertility rate is the level of fertility rate a country, a society needs to have in order to maintain the current population level. Do you get that? For example, if Korea's current population is, let's say, 50 million. If Korea wants to maintain this level of population, 50 million, today, 10 years from now, 20 years, half a century later, we need to have a replacement level fertility rate of 2.1. And what's Korea's fertility rate again? 0.72. Which means our fertility rate is about 2/3 below the replacement level fertility rate. Our fertility rate is about 1/3 of what is necessary to keep the population level, current population level, maintained. So are we in trouble or not? We're in big trouble. That's what I'm trying to say, right? Again, in other words, countries need a fertility rate of 2.1 to maintain a stable population in the absence of immigration. Okay? And any rate above that indicates population growth, while any rate below that indicates population decline. Even in international comparisons, Korea's fertility rate is clearly the lowest. For example, when limited to countries with populations of more than 10 million, Korea has the lowest birth rate in the world. Also, Korea is the only country among the 38 member countries of the OECD to have a fertility rate below 1. The average fertility rate of the OECD member countries in 2021 was 1.58. So here you can see here. So among the OECD countries, Israel has the highest fertility rate at 3. And then you have Mexico at 1.82, France 1.8, USA 1.66. I should switch a few. All right. But anyway, this is from 2021, so Korea is at 0.81. Okay. I don't know why this pops up here. Just out of curiosity, you may be wondering what the fertility rate in North Korea is like. It's near 2. Okay, so I guess I don't know why they're having babies there. Wouldn't you agree? They don't have enough food, and other problems too, right? And let's cover a couple of more stuff, and then we'll have a break. The low fertility rate has led to one noteworthy consequence in Korea: population decline. As a result of such low fertility rates, the Korean population has been declining since 2020. The Korean population in 2020 was 51.82 million, down about 32,000 from the previous year. It is the first time in 58 years that the nation's population has decreased since the statistic has been compiled starting in 1962. In fact, Korea has hit the population death cross, which refers to a point at which the number of deaths is higher than the number of births for the first time ever in 2020. In 2020, there were 275,815 births, a record low, and there were 307,764 deaths. So there were nearly 32,000 more deaths than births. And this trend has continued, and the gap is getting wider. So here we go. The first gap happened, so the reverse in trend happened for the first time in 2020, but you can see how the gap between the number of death and the number of deaths has increased, right? So already as of 2023, the number of deaths is greater by more than 100,000. Okay, so that much bigger population decline in Korea. The low fertility rate and hence aging of the population in Korea has also led to many interesting cultural phenomena. Well, these are all separate banners. There are 5 banners congratulating the birth of a baby in this village. It is so rare that they had to do this to express their gratitude on the one hand, at the same time, to really congratulate the couple. Okay? Again, in a small village, 5 different banners, all congratulating this couple for the birth of their child. Can you see so you can see the couple you see there are not kids, they're elderlies. Okay? So the wording here is elderly protection zone. That's the literal translation, right? So it's like a speed limit of 30 kilometers per hour in case elderlies are crossing. There's so many, I mean, the only people living in the countryside are elderlies that they have this sign. At many places throughout Korea. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about before we take a break is that the fertility rate has fallen so low that the sales of strollers for pets surpassed those for babies for the first time ever last year, at least for one of the largest online shopping services in Korea, namely G Market. You see how this is the sales ratio of stroller for babies, and this is for pets. So again, for the first time, last year, a bigger proportion of sales comprised strollers for pets. And it gives me a tremendous joy to share with you some of the pictures of pet strollers with pets in them. Okay? Is it just me, but when I see strollers, when I see babies, I may go, oh, hello. But when I see pets, my God, my face is in like total smile. Right? Anyway, we'll take a... Okay, welcome back. As you can see here, the question is, what are the reasons for the low birth rate in Korea? This is an easy question, I think. Why do you think Koreans are having so few number of children? Okay. Okay, so high cost of living, and also I think it's significant enough to be treated separately, and that is the high cost of education. Okay? Because just look at yourself. Back home, when you were growing up, did your parents have to spend any money on you, on education, until university, that is? But again, compared to Korea, right? Here, we start paying for private education from practically age 3. And that does not stop until they turn 18. So like for 15 years, Korean parents spend this extra money on their children that most people in other developed countries don't, right? So that's why, again, when we say high cost of living, you're tempted to include high cost of education under it, but I think, again, it's significant enough to be treated separately. Okay, so we have 2: high cost of living, high cost of education. Okay, what else? Let's say I want to hear you say 6 more factors. Long work hours. Now that would make sense if the people who are working long hours are indeed having fewer number of children. And I don't think I have seen any survey or research that made a link between long working hours and low fertility rate. But I think it's a good try. Anything else? Yes? Okay, so people get married at later age. Why? For schooling and for working. Okay? So that's third reason. And not in any order, right? Again, people are getting married at a later age because of schooling and because of working. 5 more. Yeah. So individualism leads to less number of babies born. I think it's so I think I could put that under change in value. Change in value meaning, young people are different from their older generation, right? Where they go, wow, having babies means a lot of sacrifice. I want money, I want time to myself, not, spend or devote my time and hard-earned money to raise a child, for example. That's a change in value. And that's part of what individualism is, right? So that's 1, 2. Change in value regarding marriage / having babies. Okay? 4 more. If you just give me 1 more that I'm waiting to hear from you guys, I'll forgive you and share with you what I have. 1 big one that I'm waiting to hear from you. Yeah?
I don't know if maybe, but women are not wanting to marry anymore than men because they don't accept the change in value of them.
So that's change in value.
Yeah.
Anyway, good try. But they're not the one that I'm waiting to hear from you guys. This one is big, that's why. Isn't it part of change in value, no? All right, come on, 1 more time. Last call. Okay, the answer that I've been waiting so desperately for is that increasing number of Koreans are not getting married. Okay, either voluntarily or involuntarily. Okay, so here we go. Koreans are getting married at older age due to longer schooling and working. As of 2022, remember I covered this under family, right? So this could have been updated, but similar, right? For men, it's now 34. The age at first marriage is 34. For women, it's 31.5 as of last year. Okay? So why does this matter? When you get married late, in Korea in particular, because we don't have a large number of babies born to single mothers, right? So birth is about getting married and having a baby, right? So when men and women are getting married this late, it gives them very short time during which they could have more than 1 baby, okay? And I'll tell you why this is the case a little bit later. So accordingly, Korean mothers' average age at first birth was 33.5 years, and this is significantly later than the OECD average. Okay? For US, it's not even 28, it's 27.1. England 29.1, Japan 30.7. Also, the year 2021 marks the first time since statistics were compiled in 1990 that the number of first marriages for women in their 30s, it's okay, skip. Now, but this is a big one. You see, again, Korean women are getting married at an older age than most of their counterparts in other developed countries, and that makes it, again, the average age at first baby is 33.5, right? So that leads to increase in the number of miscarriages. And my God, look at this. For example, the number of miscarriages in the last 10 years, from 2013 to 2022, total more than 1.4 million. Do you guys get this? In the last 10 years, more than 1.4 million babies died during birth because women gave birth when they were older than, let's say, what is desirable. Okay? So, and that amounts to 42% of total birth. You know, when I first read this, I was just shocked. Just totally shocked. Okay? So here is a table. So this is the total birth this is 2013 to 2022, right? So let's just stick with 2022. There were, in 2022, 249,000 births. And in the same year, we had 123,000 miscarriages. And that was almost half of the total birth. So again, you add this number of miscarriages, 1.4 million babies who couldn't live. Okay? Isn't this just shocking? I don't know of any other country that would have this high proportion of babies compared to, live birth. Just not seeing the, not being alive, that is. So women's age and miscarriage risk, this is Korea, okay? So from between the 15 to 19, it's only like less than 10%. But you see how for the age 40 to 44, it's 38.8%. For those who have babies when they're 45 years or older, it's 53%. Okay? So the data that we have indicate that many babies were born to women in their 40s. Okay? Okay, continuing with the reasons for the low birth rate in Korea. Second factor is the growing number of people are not getting married and are staying unmarried. For example, data indicate that an increasing proportion of young adults, those aged between 19 and 34-year-olds, are not getting married. So this is 2020. So this is the proportion of those in their 19 to 24-year-olds, 25 to 29, 30 to 34-year-olds. You see how the proportion unmarried is much larger, right, compared to 2000. And data on the proportion of 40-year-old Korean women who stay unmarried also show a similar trend. Let me just show you a figure first. Okay, this is the proportion of unmarried 40-year-old women in Korea. Okay, so in 1984, women born in 1944 who were not married amounted to only 1.24%. You get that? Women born in 1944, we checked in 1984 when they turned 40, only about 1% was found to be unmarried. But in 1994, 10 years later, that proportion increased to 2.59. It's not bad. But 40 years later, women born in 1983 and who were not married last year amounted to a whopping 22%. Almost a quarter of women who turned 40 last year were not married. And they are not likely to get married. Okay? Well, it's the same thing, right? This is for the 45 to 54-year age group. It's the same thing. So in 2000, it's not bad, but by 20, this is 2045. So we're about here now, but by 2045, more than 1/3 of all men between the age of 45 and 54 will not get married. And for women, it'll be about 26%. And if you're not married by that time, you're not going to get married. That's what the data indicate. Okay, not just in Korea, but elsewhere too. And this is the number of married. It's okay. And why are young people staying single? Lack of financial resources, especially for housing. This is based on survey, okay, asking people, why aren't you married? And it's the number one reason. So studies show that people who are staying single involuntarily. Okay? Again, studies indicate that they want to get married, but they are not getting married because they don't have the money, they don't have a full-time job. Okay? So, and also disillusionment with the institution of marriage. I mean, if you were born into a family where their parents constantly fought, okay, or were in an empty shell marriage, would you have a high hope of having a really nice married life? Chances are no, right? So that's a third factor for staying single. And fourth is harsh criteria for getting married. So I think, unlike in the West, I don't know if I could make this generalization, where if you fall in love, right, sometimes isn't that enough to sort of just do your thing and get married? But here in Korea, I think you just have to do a lot of calculation, okay? So when we talk about criteria for getting married, we're talking about educational qualification, income, wealth, occupation, and sometimes even height. Third, high living costs. So this is so obvious. I'm just going to skip. High education costs. So it is safe to say that per capita private spending on education is the highest in the world for overall cost, lifetime cost. Okay? So if you limit education costs to the college level, yes, USA may be number one or the England, but I think overall cost for the education cost for a child is definitely the highest in the world in Korea. Fifth, maybe this one could have been mentioned, right? Stress of raising children. Because if a Korean who is in his or her 30s, they've been through this education hell, right? Complete with the cost of money, the spending cost, and also the competition that they had to go through, right? Some of them lucky enough to make it to prestigious universities, but large majority ending up in not so prestigious universities, after having gone through all this stress. So you shouldn't think that only the school-aged children who made it to top universities were the ones who endured this stress and competition. It's the same, even for those who made it to a second tier, third tier prestigious universities. Okay? Again, stress is all the same. 6, uncertainty or pessimism over the future. It's an unconscious or subconscious thing where would you bring a child to the world if you know that the child that you will bear will have a worse life than yours? That's the thing about this uncertainty about over the future. Okay? A lot of Koreans are not sure that their children will have a better life than their own, because they have the strong belief that to succeed in Korea and to ensure success for your child, you need to have money. That's the idea that a lot of Koreans have. So unless you come from a rich family, you don't have that confidence that your children that you will have a life at least as good as your own. Okay? So if you don't have that confidence, no child, and maybe not even marriage. 7th, young people's change of value regarding having a baby, and this was mentioned, and it's about keeping their freedom and independence, to have more financial freedom or to avoid financial strain, to have more time for oneself, to have more time and energy to focus on their career, happy, and some of them are happy with their current life and lifestyle and don't want it to change. Having a baby would involve too many sacrifices, and some of them just particularly do not like babies. They may prefer dogs, pets. All right, and 8th, okay, I lied to you. I just have 7 factors, not 8. Anyway, if the low birth rate persists, it is forecast that Korea's total population will drop from the current 51 million to as low as some 34 million in 2067. So you can see how we have 3 projections. High projection puts Korean population at 45 million as of 2067, 39 million mid projection, but the low projection puts the Korean population at 33.8 million in 2067. Okay? That's down about a third from the current 51 million. Okay? A UN report says that with the current population trends, Korea's population will drop to 25 million in 2100, 5 million in 2200, and can become extinct by 2750. So if you're thinking of buying some real estate in Korea, not a good idea. Again, if the birth rate remains at 1.19 children per woman, South Korea could face natural extinction by 2750, and I think that's being generous, right? Because this is based on a birth rate of 1.19, but if Korea maintains this 0.7 fertility rate, natural extinction by 2500, I would say. Anyway, one may be tempted to think that a smaller population is a good thing, right? In thinking that there will be less competition, more job opportunities, and lower housing costs, right? But it's not the case. Why? This is true if there are a lot of babies, if there are a lot of young people. But we're talking about a smaller population with old people. So, old people, do they spend more than young people, or do they spend less? They spend less. Okay, so again, population pyramid where young people, there's a large number of young people and children, is when smaller population works out to be a good thing, but again, it's not. Okay, because smaller population full of old people, how good could that be? How good could that be, right? I'm sort of in a rush to get through the next two parts, and one is now we turn to the impact. So we talked about the nature of aging in Korea and the reasons why Korea is aging, right? Particularly the two things: longer life expectancy at birth and low fertility rate, and also why Koreans are having so few babies, right? Now let's talk about the impact. And I told you that there are impact at two levels, right? One is societal, second, individual, right? So let's first talk about the impact of aging of the population at the societal level. Mostly economic. Can anyone tell me what societal impact of aging population are? Anyone?
Because there's less people working, there's less people paying for Social Security.
Okay. So less number of people working, so less number of social, I don't know what's, so less number of people working and less money for welfare of elderlies, right? Among others. Yes. Okay, so less consumption, and again, the hint is, although it's societal, it's mostly economic, right? So anyway, here we go. What are the societal and economic impact of the aging of the population? Number one, the number of the economically active population will fall. Okay? Because the people in this age group are the ones who pay tax, because they're the ones who are working, right? Of course, elderlies also work, but the proportion is much smaller, and because they're earning, it's much smaller. The tax they pay is also small. So I think, Remember this? Actually, I'm showing you this for the first time. So this, we're between this and here. So let's say about 70% of the total population comprise of the economically active population, 15 to 64, 70%. But by 2067, it'll fall to 45.4%, and proportion of the elderlies will exceed that of the economically active population. Okay, so that's one. Second impact, shrinking number of the economically active population means that there will be fewer workers to support the elderly. Okay, so in 2005, there were 8 workers who paid for the welfare of the elderly in 2005, but that number dropped to 4 per 1 in 2020, and that number will drop to 1.4 per 1 in 2050. Okay, so graphically it looks like this. Okay, so ratio of workers to retirees, 2005, 8 to 1, 2020, 4 per 1, 2050, practically 1 per 1. Okay? So young people today who will be in their 40s in 2050, there will be 1 worker per 1 retiree. So that will be a killer for young people in this room. I'm talking about Korean students. Third, diminishing consumption. Shrinking workforce leads to diminishing consumption. Fourth, shrinking workforce and diminishing consumption cause GDP growth and investment to slow, which threatens or which leads to economic stagnation, right? Fifth, declining tax revenues for the government. 6, budget imbalance, because government expenditure on the elderly will soar while its revenue in the form of taxes will decline. 7th, pension funds can dry out. 8th, funding for healthcare can become inadequate as disproportionate share of healthcare costs are spent on elderlies. Here is a data for you. As of 2022, you see those aged 60 or older accounted for 43.2% of total medical expenses. Okay? So when those aged 60 or older accounted for about 20, not even 20% of the total population, yet the medical expenses, 43% of the total. All right, now the last part, problems facing the elderly in Korea. Again, this is an important issue because sizable proportion of the total population comprises of elderlies. And in the near future, again, the proportion of elderlies in the total population will increase even more, right? So we need to understand what problems they face at the individual level, right? So the question is, what kinds of problems do the elderly face at the individual level? On a personal level, what problems do Korean elderlies face? So some of the things I have for you are limited to Korea. Some of them are universal. Anyone? They need to keep working because? We have a pension of sorts, but not enough. But let's make your comment sort of under poverty. So a lot of Korean elderlies live under the poverty line, okay? So they don't have enough money to live on in their old life. Now, since she mentioned old age benefit for Koreans, although Korea is one of the richest countries in the world, we earmark just a small proportion of our annual budget for elderlies. And this is how it goes. For elderlies, only the bottom 70% of elderlies receive about $250 a month. Again, not every elderly qualifies for that. Those earning, let me put it another way. Bottom 70% earners, income earners among the elderlies, maybe if they're not working, you cannot really say bottom 70% earners, right? So bottom 70% asset holders among the elderlies receive $250, and that's it, okay? And at least one thing I could brag about Korea is that we have universal health care. So that's good. But anyway, poverty, what else? Well, think about your grandparents. What problems do they face? Yes? Oh, very good. Okay, let me ask you this. Is suicide rate positively correlated with age or negatively correlated with age? Suicide rate, and this is not unique to Korea, it's universal. Suicide rate is positively correlated with age, meaning older the age, higher the suicide rate. So suicide rate among those who are 80 years or older, the highest by far. Okay? Yeah. So that's the second thing, right? Poverty, suicide, what else? 6 more. Yeah. Okay, so health ailments. You know, elderlies have not just one, but a few health ailments, right? So that's, I don't know of any, I know a few elderlies myself. I don't think there's anyone who is free from any kind of ailment, right? So they all suffer from something as you get older, right? So that's 3. Poverty, suicide, health ailments. 5 more. Yeah.
I was going to say there's a lack of nursing homes in Korea, but I don't know if that's really a problem per se, because it's just like a cultural difference, but you could say there's a lack of social services there and a lack of like places for elderly to go, like if they need that sort of care. outside of the
Well, the lack of, or should I say, relative lack of nursing homes in Korea is due to the fact that there is not like as much demand for it as it is in the West. So I haven't heard of anyone not being able to go to a nursing home because they could not find a spot, okay, or available bed or whatever, right? So anyway, it's an interesting point. Yes? Loneliness. It's definitely a problem. If you take a survey asking old people what is your most serious concern? I would say they would name things like health, and it'll always also be loneliness, okay? Because as you get older, your friends die, sometimes your spouses die, not so sometimes, but eventually, right? So you get to spend more time by yourself, lonely. It is the saddest thing, you know, when I walk out of my apartment, see an older, old person, you know, man or a woman, just sitting on a bench, just staring at the sky, kind of. So sad. But maybe that's the destiny of every one of us. But anyway, so loneliness. 4 more. Yeah?
I don't know if this speaks to that low quality of life, that quality of life. Because sometimes you have to work to keep your days.
You know, it's something that has been mentioned for the first time ever, and I think it's something to think about. Low quality of life. And depending on how you define quality of life, you could obviously think that you know, elderlies just may not have a good quality of life, right? But again, something to think about. Anyway, let me show you what I have here. First is loss of a meaningful role in society, ageism. Oh, there are 9. Is there anything that surprises you here? You know what great digital divide is, right? You know what digital divide is? It's the access and knowing how to use, like, for example, computer, in your smartphone, all kinds of applications on smartphone, right? So as you get older, you know, some elderlies actually do not even know how to use the computer, let alone you know, many applications on smartphone, right? So, you know, like now, from buying an airline ticket to paying taxes, so much is done through the internet, right? But many elderlies, you know, sometimes do not have access to those sort of digital gadgets, and even if they do have them, they may not know how to use them, right? So that's what a great digital divide is. And you know what ageism is? Ageism is an elderly being discriminated based on physical characteristics, that they are weaker, that they do not have a good memory. So there are many negative stereotypes associated with ageism, that they are bad drivers, that they are asexual, that they are forgetful, that they are cranky. All of these are stereotypes which are untrue. Okay, if you have a forgetful grandfather, it's a safe bet that he was forgetful when he was young too. You know what I'm saying? There is a little bit of a memory loss, but not enough to really be able to tell the difference, right? And what is, well, the loss of meaningful role in society is simple too, right? As you turn 65, for example, in Korea, you retire, and so you no longer become you no longer have a meaningful role in society, right? So let me just show you the first one here. So before retiring, you had a role in knowledge. There was a power within the family. You worked. See, remember in the farming community, even to this day, if you're a farmer, do you retire until? I mean, is there a retirement age? You work until you cannot move. But in urban, industrial setting, society forces you to retire even though you could work still, right? So that's why economic activity, you're just cut off from it. Also, you lose your sense of identity because much of your identity right now for students, your identity is largely based on your school, right? School identity and what year you're in. But when you start working, a lot of your identity it derives from your work. But when you retire, you lose that identity, okay? And going back to this one slide, emphasis on youth, because with industrialization, the ideal worker is someone who is mobile and strong, right? So but when you're an old person, you're no longer as mobile as young people, and also you're not as strong as young people, right? So, and also emphasis, it's okay. And also old people, they're victimized and abused, right? So even in Korea, a considerable proportion of elderlies are abused. And who are their abusers? Number one, their children. And why do you think that happens more in Korea than elsewhere? Yes, more elderlies. Remember, about 20% of elderlies in Korea live with their adult children, right? And their adult children are the ones who abuse them. Okay, if the abuse does take place, and poverty from 2021 data, it shows that about 43% of elderlies in Korea live under the poverty line. You know what the poverty line is? Poverty line is when you make less than half of the national average. Okay? So Korean elderlies, about 43% live under the poverty line. Okay? And that's the highest among the OECD countries, 3 times higher than the OECD average. Okay? So I'm not going to show you this, but you've seen an elderly woman or man pushing a cart full of boxes, right? You know, they're very heavy. You know how much they get from when they unload this cart full of boxes? Like $2-3. So they do that several times a day. And I'm ashamed to be telling you this because doesn't Korea have the means to take care of them? Of course we do. But we're just spending our money, tax money, in the wrong way. That's definitely one thing. And lack of will. Okay, we just don't see taking care of elderlies is a priority of the government, right? And let me just show you the last one, suicide. Okay. That's a typical picture you see, right? Okay. So when we look at the relationship between suicide rate and age group, it's 10 to 19, 20 to 29, and so on, right? And look at this. So this is from 2021. The suicide rate, which is the number of suicides per 100,000 population, for those between the age of 10 to 19, it was 7.1 per 100,000 population. But look what the rate is for over 80, 61.3. So the suicide rate for those over 80 was about 9 times higher than the suicide rate for teenagers. So again, this is not unique to Korea. It's universal. So keep that in mind. Suicide rate is positively correlated with age. Higher the age, higher the suicide rate, as you can see here. So there's a slight sort of diversion, but again, that's sort of a general trend. Okay? Okay, so any question before I let you go? In danger of having so many people not happy with your question. All right, thank you, and I'll see you next week. All right, students at Nanjing University.